Okay, I think this is fine.
Okay.
Goodness, see the numbers.
Just to ask though, if my slides, Sarah, will you be able to share my slides?
Yes,
So,
sir.
Dempsey, I think we've more or less rectified it now. So we should be starting in the second. I think we're already live, actually.
Okay, all right.
That's fine.
I'll wait for your
good
prompting.
afternoon. Yeah, so Wale, now that we are on practice session and things appear to be sorting themselves out, can you please share the slides now? It was on during the practice session, but it's not showing now. I know that I'm live. I'm just saying this that everybody knows that we've been going through some hitches and we're trying to sort them out. Okay, fantastic. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you for joining in this afternoon. We do apologize for the technical glitches that we've been having. We don't know what's been going on with Zoom, but we've been on practice session since 1 p.m., but have been having difficulties logging on. Thankfully, we are now on today. Also, Davidson Otaro, who is our facilitator for today, is logging in from the United States of America, but he's also having challenges with his Zoom. So you might have to contend with not seeing his face, but I'm sure his presentation will be clear enough. So good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for joining in. It's my pleasure this afternoon to welcome you to module 1 of the Mastering Blockchain Training of the MBA ICLE. The topic is Introduction to Blockchain Technology. I mean, I would have done a more elaborate introduction than this, but we are far behind time and Davidson is here, so why not he does all of it. I'll also let him speak about himself just briefly rather than read the citation so we don't waste further time and we just cut to the chase. I have a few comments to make about recent developments as far as training and development is concerned in the MBA, but I know we've taken up a lot of your time. I'll do that when we get to the middle of the session. So welcome, everybody, and I'll now introduce Davidson. Davidson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Riding on what the chair had said, we had serious difficulties, and I guess I'll just move ahead. Can the slide be made bolder? I don't know. So today's presentation is basically going to be an introduction to blockchain technology. There are going to be 4 sessions, so it runs until next week, Tuesday. So today, tomorrow, Monday, and Tuesday. And the different facilitators will be taking different aspects of the training. Mine is basically, you could see it as a teaser of some sort. So it's going to get you in a place where by the time the other presenters come, hopefully, your knowledge and appreciation of blockchain would have improved to a certain degree. A little bit about myself, which I'll try and do in about a minute or two. I was initially a partner at Alex, which I left last year, and I headed the firm's technology, IP, and startup practice. In that capacity, I did quite a bit in the fintech and startup space, which I am grateful for, before I transited to the investment space as well. And one of the things which I'm quite happy that I did was being part of the Securities and Exchange Commission's roadmap committee, which created a framework for the use of fintech in the capital market. We did quite some examination on the use of blockchain and its the assets that are created on it, such as what we see with cryptocurrency and even NFTs now. And I'm really happy to see how things have progressed with the SEC releasing guidelines and framework around virtual assets, as well as the subsequent activities by the Central Bank of Nigeria. But having said all of those things, we can move straight to the training. Can we move to slide 4, please? Slide 4. So the question is, what is blockchain? And I will try, oh, this is really small. Again, topologies, everyone. I believe the slides will be shared subsequently, so we can have the opportunity to see it clearly. Now, the definition and explanation of blockchain is very crucial because it can get a little bit convoluted and messy, with a lot of words thrown around the place. So I would try and really break it down so that we can appreciate it for what it is. And I think if that's all we take out of this session, really, I'll be grateful for that. So you will typically see a definition like a blockchain is a distributed and decentralized ledger. What you need to understand is this, and paint a picture in your mind's eye about blockchain. It is a chain of blocks. So that helps, just being able to conceptualize a chain that has different blocks in it. Now, each block contains a list of transactions. So when the blockchain is mined or created, we'll get some of the technical words subsequently. When a chain of blocks are created, each one of those blocks has a list of transactions in it. Now, once one particular block is filled, it is then linked to a previous block. So let's just picture it about 10 blocks, right? But one block, first of all, is mined or created. When that block is filled with what is supposed to go into that transaction, another block is then created. Now, with those blocks, you have what is called a cryptographic hash. So think of a hash as a symbol, maybe like a mark, right, that is stamped on each block. That hash, that cryptographic hash, is unique in itself. No other block that is created can have that same hash. So if one hash, just think of maybe one hash as an X, the other one as an A, the other one as an F, and there are 10 blocks there, and they're all created and mined. That means that you cannot, well, we'll still get to whether it can be done or not. But the concept behind it is you cannot change any of those blocks without going to change all the other ones. So you typically then see things like a blockchain is a distributed and decentralized ledger that is immutable. Immutable meaning that it cannot be changed. Why was that concept of it not being changed existing for a long while? Because we've actually realized it can be changed, but it's going to be a very expensive procedure. It is because if there are 10 blocks in that chain, like we just described, and one has X, in order for you to change that X, you have to go back and change the A. Now, to create each block, there are 3 types of methods that are used. Well, the most popular ones, right, which is proof of concept, proof of history, and proof of staking. But again, we will get to that. I'm just trying to move quite fast because of all the time that we've lost here. But I wanted to just create that in our minds so that we at least have an overview of how the blockchain in itself works. Then let's even unpack some of the words that are there. So we typically say it is decentralized. Now, what does decentralized mean? It simply means that there is no central authority. When you look at central authorities like the Central Bank of Nigeria, for example, it means that there is one place that controls that entire process. So you have the central bank governor who ensures that monetary policies flow in a particular way. Monies will not move around without there being an oversight from a central authority. But with blockchain, we say it operates on a decentralized network of computers, right? So there is no central authority. If we are involved in a transaction, all of us would have transparency and visibility over that transaction. So what it then means is there will be no point of failure, because if all of us have visibility over it, it's going to be difficult, well, And then people said impossible to change all of that, because to change it requires, in some instances, a lot of energy, right? Which can disrupt systems. Or if you're using proof of stake, for example, you need to stake your for maybe like your cryptocurrency that is involved in that mining process, or whatever you're trying to mine, using the blockchain technology. Again, stay with me. I will try and keep it as simple as that. Components of a block, there are different types of components, right? So I had mentioned before that there are a list of transactions that will be in a block. Now, what you will find in in that list will be details about, for example, the sender, the receiver, and the amount of cryptocurrency that is being transferred, where that blockchain is being used for that process, for example. Now, these transactions are verified and they are added to the block, creating a chronological record. So whoever is going to receive what is being sent on the blockchain, for example, that block will contain the identification or the because sometimes the identity of the parties are not so readily visible, but whoever is involved in that transaction, it will show the sender and the receiver. It will show the amount or whatever has been sent on the blockchain. So think of it like a digital receipt of some sort. And note again that with everything that involves the blockchain, it is digital. There is no physical side to it. Now, another thing that is there is the hash. Again, I tried explaining it. So just think of it, right, as what you would call an alphanumeric string. It is the digital fingerprint for the block. And like I said, it is unique, so nobody can change it. It is, you can look at it as a security seal. So anything that is changed within that entire process needs to go through a very thorough and rigorous process of change, which can be so expensive and in some cases practically impossible, depending on the consensus mechanism that is used. Again, this, like I said, this my session is almost like an introduction of some sort to these words and concepts, such that by the time everybody leaves here and probably comes for tomorrow's session, things will sound less opaque and be very transparent. So let's move to the next slide. So with the blockchain structure, you have chain of blocks, which are linked together with those hashes. Now, each block contains the hash of the previous ones, creating a secure and chronological chain. The essence behind this is, if you tamper with one block, you need to tamper with the entire chain. And this is crucial for the entire security process of blockchain. And we're still going to go into the history of blockchain. Why did blockchain even come into the picture? Who needs it? Why is it important? And what is it even trying to do? Why do we need to bother ourselves with all of these things? We will unpack that. Then you have a consensus mechanism. There are three types, like I mentioned to you. Sorry, can we all mute, please? You have proof of concept. Sorry, the consensus mechanism, you have proof of work, proof of stake, and proof of history, which I would expatiate on as we move along. But just know that before each block is mined, there is a process that has to go into play for each of those blocks to come into existence. Something needs to happen. They don't just come there from the blues, right? Maybe I should even unpack a little bit. Let's start with proof of works. Now, proof of works basically means that there are people that are called miners. They're the people responsible for creating the blockchain. Now, a miner can be you or to myself, but we would have signed up to be part of that whole process. Now, how do we create a block? We compete to solve complex mathematical puzzles so that we can validate transactions and create new blocks. So, for example, let's say we want to create one Bitcoin, because Bitcoin was the very first cryptocurrency created on the blockchain. So we want to create one Bitcoin. What then happens is there'll be mathematical puzzles that will be put forward before us, and we'll be required to solve it. Now, the first person who actually solves that puzzle will broadcast or share that solution to the network of miners for verification, right? So this solution that is presented will then be checked, verified by everyone. And then if it is deemed to be valid, the miner will be allowed to add a new block to the blockchain. Now, proof of works is majorly used for Bitcoin blockchain. And that's because it's very time consuming. I mean, think of maybe we all, and this mathematical puzzle is usually very complex. For those of us who are not good in maths, it probably means that we can never be miners anyway. But just think of how long it may take to solve a very complex mathematical puzzle. And then again, it uses a lot of energy to get it done. So because of that, people started to ask themselves, how can we have a less expensive and less time-consuming process to mine on the blockchain? And so when Ethereum, which was another blockchain network that was created, separate from the Bitcoin blockchain, they came up with what is called proof of stake, right? So with proof of stake, sorry, if you're not, can everybody mute, please? Someone is speaking in the background.
Sarah, can you at your end? Sarah, mute at your end.
So with proof of stake, you're not then required to solve any puzzles or mathematical equation in order to create new blocks or to validate transactions. Rather, what happens is people would stake their cryptocurrency as collateral, and that cryptocurrency will be inaccessible until the new block is created. So there is no need to solve puzzles in order to create a new block. What you just do is that you will stake your crypto or your token that is the basis for that transaction. You will put it forward and stake it in order to create a new cryptocurrency or token. And what you stake is the same amount that is created. So if you stake and you lose your stake. So in other words, for you to stake, you need to make sure that you are sure that that new transaction is going to go through. The next one, which is what you will call the most recent one, is proof of history. Now, proof of history is kind of designed to establish a chronological order of transactions, and then they create a verifiable record of historical events. So you look at the history of previous transactions, and then based on that history, you then create a new block on the blockchain. So as you can see with proof of stake and proof of history, you don't require any solution of mathematical puzzles or equations. You simply either stake or you work using the history and the chronology of previous transactions. If you have questions, you can leave it in the box. I can see something in the question and answer, but because I'm using my phone and at the same time having to read the slides, it's going to be difficult for me to look at everything at the same time. But you can definitely leave your questions in the question and answer section. Now, the next thing that we have is decentralization and peer-to-peer network. I've spoken a little bit around decentralization before, right? Which is that it is there is no central authority in that sense. So that's where the concept of decentralization comes in. But when you speak of nodes, again, this is another word that you will see whenever you're reading content or trying to understand blockchain technology. Now, nodes are what you would call the participants, right? The people who are involved in the entire mining or creation process. And the nodes can be individuals like you or I, they can be the computers that are used to solve the puzzles, or they can be organizations that have a stake. Now everybody or every individual or company or organization that is a node, right, will have a copy of the entire blockchain. So you're not just going to have bits and pieces of the blockchain. Each one of us, if there are 20 of us, for example, that are involved in that entire creation process, we will all have a copy of the entire blockchain. Again, that then, and we may not even know ourselves at all. So you can consider the nodes as historians. Each of us are in possession of that decentralized ledger. Again, ledger, think of a ledger like a book. So each one of us has a copy of that book. Now, whenever any blockchain is created, we will then be able to verify and make sure that everything that is in that blockchain is accurate. So you don't have, one central authority that has that. Rather, each one of us has a copy of the blockchain. So you don't think of how you would have a chief historian, who is holding one book somewhere and everybody has to go to that ledger. No, with this decentralized system, each node, which is everybody involved in that transaction, has a copy of the digital ledger. Now, peer-to-peer network is another word that is used. In order to understand that, just think of it as peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer, peer-to-peer. That basically means there are people like you and I, we are peers now because we are lawyers, right? So, and it can be called P2P, for example. So one way of understanding P2P, is looking at it as each pair is communicating with themselves without the need for a third party. So we're able to have a level of transparency. There isn't one single point of failure. So if somebody is knocked out of the process, it doesn't mean that the entire thing fails. There is that connectivity between all the pairs that are involved in that process. So it's a P2P network that is involved in the entire mining process of the blockchain. Next slide, please. Now you have cryptographic security, right? So cryptographic security is like a technology that is, so when you think of cryptography, right, that is creating something using cryptic techniques or methods. So cryptography is what is used to create stuff like the hash functions, that you see, the digital signatures that you see, to secure the transactions and to control the creation of new units of cryptocurrency and all of that. So in order for the transaction to be secure, cryptography is used to kind of midwife that entire process, right? Then it can be very complex and technologically advanced, but all of that is part of what makes the entire process secure. And some of that, those mathematical puzzles that are typically used in the entire process forms part of that cryptography. Now, I've mentioned the issue of immutability before, right? And whether it truly means that it is completely immutable. So maybe we will just unpack that a bit. The whole essence of immutability means that you cannot change something. So the principle or the understanding before was that once a block is added to the blockchain, altering its content, I put that as nearly impossible. But before, the presumption was that it was completely impossible, due to the cryptographic link with the previous block. So let's cast our mind to what I described before, a process where there is a hash that is created, which is unique using cryptography, So let's just say it's X and A, but that X is cryptographic in its sense. So everybody that is involved in the mining process sees it for what it is and understands it. And so there is no way to, typically there should be no way to alter it. But because we have seen situations where there has been some hackings, right, of the blockchain, it then made people to start looking at it. Now, but how can this happen though? Because if you've added the block, how is anybody going to be able to change all of that? There's a concept of the 51% attack vulnerability, right? So that immutability relies on the assumption that all of us will be honest, right? So, for example, if there are 20 of us, because we have decided to be part of this process, 20 of us will be honest. But they realize that if an attacker can gain control of more than 50% of the network's computing power, so let's say we're using proof of work, right, that requires solving the mathematical puzzle. If an attacker actually gains up to 51% of the computing power that is required for the generation of a block under proof of work, they can actually manipulate past transactions, and once they do that, the integrity of the blockchain is compromised. So it's referred to as the 51% vulnerability. Also, it was discovered that with certain blockchain networks, there may be what is called a temporary fork that is created. Now that temporary fork is when there is a divergence, so maybe there's some kind of fault that happens. Maybe there's a protocol upgrade or something like that. They can then create another pathway, which will then mean that people who are involved in the process could suddenly lose visibility of certain parts of the transaction. And that can lead to some form of hacking or loss of that entire blockchain structure. Also, where there's a disagreement between the different nodes, right, within that community, it can also lead to that kind of forking process. So we can see that while the concept or the idea of the blockchain is for it to be immutable, you may not always have that in certain situations. We've even seen the situations where things like software bugs, can actually be introduced by malicious actors, and then it can compromise the systems, which can affect the entire process. So there is still some work to be done with the blockchain, right, to make it much better than it presently is, and I guess at the end of the day, for those who are fully signed up with the entire blockchain platform, hopefully you get to 100% immutability. But it doesn't mean that the blockchain in itself is less effective than it already is. I mean, we're seeing a lot of developments happening using the blockchain. And even though I might not get to it in my own presentation, by the time we complete this entire process, we will see not only how valuable blockchain is to the business community, but also to the legal community as well. So I think I've touched on consensus algorithms, which is proof of work, proof of stake, and proof of history. We can move to the next slide. Yeah. So whenever people think of blockchain, it's almost inevitable that you think of cryptocurrency, right? But there are actually a few other uses of sorry, I almost did it myself, of the blockchain. Of course, there's also NFTs too, and there are tokens which we will touch on. But I wanted to just touch briefly on smart contracts and dApps, decentralized applications. So smart contracts are seeing a lot of entry into the space. And I think even for lawyers as well, we may need to fully appreciate what smart contracts can do, because it may not necessarily be a disruption to us as lawyers, right? But it's definitely something that we need to understand, because with effective execution of smart contracts, there are certain roles that lawyers play in that entire process that may be affected. But what we've realized is that at the end of the day, lawyers are, we cannot be done away with. But we're going to come to that point where for you to be able to find a role within this ecosystem, the client may rely on you for an understanding of some of these concepts, even if they don't want you to create the technology, so it's important that we know this. So what are smart contracts? At the end of the day, smart contracts are actually used on the Ethereum blockchain. So you wouldn't see it on Bitcoin's blockchain, right? And Bitcoin blockchain is unique in itself. It's an ecosystem on itself. But Ethereum can be used by different platforms for a number of things. So you see smart contracts with Ethereum, and then it's typically described as self-executing contracts. So that means you don't need to do anything. People don't need to physically sign anything when it comes to smart contracts. Rather, it is embedded in the code in the blockchain, right? And so they automatically execute and enforce themselves. You would have predefined conditions, right, embedded in that code. And then once those conditions are met, they execute themselves. So you don't need any intermediaries, you don't need any central authority. The idea of it is let it be transparent and efficient for everyone. And I'll give a live example. So let's say we have a contract where I am supposed to buy land, and that entire thing is embedded in a smart contract. So once the transaction is completed, once I make the purchase for the land using my cryptocurrency on the blockchain, nobody needs to be involved in that entire process. Once it's done, I immediately get value for the payment that I've made. So it's self-executing. Nobody needs to give an approval. Typically somebody will need to say, okay, the money has entered into my account. I've seen it. Okay, here are the landed documents, here are the papers. No, all of that is automated. So once the conditions have been met, let's say the preconditions are okay, let the cryptocurrency come into this platform, or let this be created. Once that is done, it is self-executed. No need for any third party, no need to say, okay, let it be in an escrow account. No. Once that happens, it goes through. The intention behind smart contracts really is to reduce the risk of manipulation or fraud. So you don't have a situation where somebody says, oh, especially when people will say they're not going to release it until the alert has come. Some people will not even collect transfers. They will say, no, it has to be with either POS or with cash. But with the blockchain, there's no need to even worry yourself around all of that. It self-executes, in itself, using that same cryptography. Again, it is deemed to be immutable under that immutable ledger system. So once it is deployed on the blockchain, you cannot delete, you cannot change it, because it requires you to go back and do the entire thing all over again. Now, there's something that is typically said that it is trustless, so we don't need to trust ourselves. I will say, I'm trusting you. That's why I'm doing this type. No, all of that is not necessary. It is self-executing. So whether we say ourselves, whether we know it ourselves, it really doesn't matter. That's how smart contracts work. Decentralized applications. So dApps for short. They run on the blockchain network. I think one way of really distinguishing it, other than what is written on the slides, is contrasting it with how you have centralized servers. So you have servers in one place. With dApps, everything is decentralized. So you don't have one common place where you can go to and find that transaction. Rather, you have it across the different nodes or participants in that network. And I think we've been able to unpack quite a bit here. I want to believe that this particular session, if I'll say so myself, would have probably given a level of insight, to the participants so far. Of course, with blockchain technology, there's always a lot to unpack, but we would leave it for now, and then let's move to the second lesson. Next slide, please, which deals with the history and evolution of blockchain. And I had mentioned this before, right? That why does blockchain even exist? Why are we disturbing ourselves? Why was it created in the first place? Does it have any value? Because all of these things that everybody's just talking about, just be making so much noise. Of course, use cases, we also have something like the central bank digital currency. That wouldn't be getting there per se in my own presentation. That will come in to other presentations. But again, the foundation of some of this would help us. So let's look at the history of blockchain. Can we move to the next slide, please? Sarah. Okay, next slide. So now in 2007, 2008, there's what we typically refer to as the global financial crisis, which affected different parts of the world. For those of us who were around then and working, or like our honorable chairman and some other folks here, we would remember that during that period, the banks had a lot of challenges in Nigeria. In places like America and Europe, though, it was even much worse than it was in Nigeria. But we remember it very clearly, for those of us who were even already working then, how the likes of Intercontinental Bank, Oceanic Bank, and a couple of other guys went under, right? Because some of them had ties to some of these global banks. And I had a few clients then who were overexposed due to the kind of loans that they had given, particularly Intercontinental Bank and Oceanic. Those ones, they were really bad. They were giving out loans without collaterals. But it was even worse, in the Western world, where a lot of these things were really going on. So this happened, and there was an element of distrust, right, and dissatisfaction with traditional financial institutions. People started questioning, why should you keep your money in a bank? Because you put money there and a lot of things happened to it. There was devaluation, people lost their properties, almost like what's going on in the world now in terms of global financial crisis, but then it was really tough. And around that period, the jury is still out whether blockchain was an answer to it or whether it was just coincidental. I think it was highly coincidental, but around that time in 2009, a mysterious figure called Satoshi Nakamoto. Somebody now has come out and is claiming to be Satoshi, but You'd ask yourself why it took him that long to come out. So he's in court now trying to prove his identity. But in 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto created the very first blockchain, which is called Genesis block. So the Genesis block kind of laid the foundation for subsequent blocks, and so everybody looks at it as the very first block that was mined. It had its unique hash, timestamp. There was something that was very interesting in that block because it had a reference to a newspaper headline from that particular day. So if you go online and you find what the Genesis block looks like, you will actually see the newspaper headline for that day in 2009 when it was created. And that was how we saw blockchain come into the world. There was the Bitcoin blockchain, so Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency that was created through the process of blockchain technology. Interesting thing about Bitcoin is that it has a maximum limit of supply of 21 million Bitcoins. So they introduced a level of scarcity in the Bitcoin protocol from the beginning, such that you cannot mine more than 21 million Bitcoins. So when you think of how the price of Bitcoin goes up sometimes, it kind of gives you insights, right? Because it goes up because of scarcity. You can't have more than that. So somebody cannot just vex and say, okay, I'm going to mine Bitcoin. No, because in the protocol for the Bitcoin, in its blockchain itself, there is a limit of 21 million. And so that's what it has to be. And so that scarcity of buying and selling is what it is. And so Bitcoin is arguably more valuable than any other crypto asset that is out there. I think that the last time I checked, it was going for 50,000. One BTC or one Bitcoin is valued at 50,000. It then gives you an insight into why some people like to use it as a store of value, because when you look at Nigeria's currency, for example, and what it has gone through, imagine if somebody had invested in Bitcoin a couple of years ago. Say you had 10 million naira and you put it in Bitcoin, right? Even though Bitcoin may have had its ups and downs, with the recent ETFs that have been created in the US, you've seen a surge in the price of Bitcoin because of that scarcity that is embedded in it. And now that there's a trust fund aspect that has now been introduced into it as well, you're also seeing a lot of growth in that space, right? So so that's part of the history of Bitcoin and the history of blockchain, and we've seen it grow from what it was to kind of take over the entire world. But other than just that side of things, the question of why it was even created would also be considered here. So we have precursors to blockchain, the early concepts in cryptography. Some of the things that we need to understand about cryptography, like I had referenced earlier on, is its approach towards that entire creation of sorry, somebody is so in order for you to be able to create what you call a tamper resistant digital ledger, there needs to be a level of security that goes along with it. And we were already beginning to see some of that, emerging around the time of blockchain. And so what someone like Satoshi did was to leverage on that to create his blockchain white paper, which you can find online. I mean, for those who have the time and can digest some of that, it's quite an interesting read, really, which kind of set out the thematic areas and the concept behind why this was created, and how cryptography was going to kind of control the growth of blockchain, its uses, and how it can actually disrupt financial technology. Next slide, please. Okay. Yeah, I've kind of touched on this, right? What I'll also add here is part of the essence of blockchain, and there have been questions around whether it can actually achieve that, because what you've now seen is other use cases are now being pushed for the blockchain. And so for the critics of blockchain technology, they've said, well, yeah, it has other use cases, but if you look at the genesis of why it was created in the first place, it falls short of some of that. Now, one of the things that we typically say is that the concept of money, right, is crucial when contrasting blockchain assets that come out of blockchain, like cryptocurrency in particular. Because when the blockchain was created and Bitcoin was mined out of that process, Satoshi's concept was this will be a challenge to existing fiat money, fiat currency, so it's called fiat currency. Fiat currency is your Naira and Kobo, your US dollar, those are fiat. While, and it's usually said in contrast to virtual assets or cryptocurrency, for example. But if you look at the concept of money, money is used to buy and sell. Initially, we had trade by barter, which was kind of problematic for a variety of reasons and all of that. So the concept of what is called sound money was brought in to solve all the problems of trade by barter. Now, what are the elements of sound money? It must be generally acceptable, which will address, the issue of coincidence of want. So everybody has to accept it as a medium of exchange. Now, items must be priceable using its unit, so it has to serve as a common measure of value. It must be easily and readily divisible and summed up, and it must be able to retain relative value over a long period of time. And so things like cowries, rare metals, and now fiat have been used as money. So the question that is typically asked about crypto is it generally acceptable? Is everybody going to be able to accept it? If those kind of things, and if those elements are not met by crypto or other assets that come out of the blockchain, then it will not be considered as a medium of exchange, and so cannot be money. And these are some of the things that made a couple of folks like the last CBN governor in Nigeria to keep fighting Bitcoin and blockchain without fully trying to understand what it meant. Now, when we look at Bitcoin, the Bitcoin era, the growth, adoption, and challenges, some of the things that we need to understand about it is, what are the factors that led to it? First of all, we can talk about decentralization, right? So I've mentioned consistently about how you have centralized systems, therefore meaning that they are controlled by governments, central banks, and financial institutions. Now, the blockchain, which Bitcoin was the very first blockchain that was created, was kind of created to have a decentralized form of currency, which will operate on a peer-to-peer network. Again, I've explained what peer-to-peer is, which is all of us are peers on the same network, thereby removing the need for central authorities. There was also the place of security and trust. I mentioned, how the global economies had gone through a lot. And so there were concerns that traditional financial institutions, they're susceptible to fraud, hacking, unauthorized taxes, and your money can just vanish. The intention was that cryptocurrency, using cryptographic techniques to secure transactions, will provide a high level of security, and then therefore eliminate things like fraud. You also have the issue of privacy and anonymity. With most of what happens now, again, the idea of this is let good actors be involved in it, but also explains why some people or some governments are wary of, blockchain or cryptocurrency, because for a while, if you follow trends, it almost looked like it was a very opaque system. You didn't know who was involved, so it became a preferred choice for hackers and cyber criminals and stuff like that. But yeah, part of the intention was that anonymity and privacy. Because when you are transacting on normal fiat currency approaches, you need to disclose personal identity, so there's no privacy, right? But many cryptocurrencies do offer a degree of anonymity, which allows users to make transactions without revealing their identities. There was also the issue of global accessibility. Not everyone may have access to traditional banking systems. Now, cryptocurrency is such that when you have internet connection, you can participate in financial system, in that ecosystem in itself, which can actually promote financial inclusion on a global scale. Some of those that kind of concept has been kind of narrowed down as you've seen fintech expand to solve some of that, but it's probably still not enough. So the concept behind it was, okay, let there be global accessibility. There were also the issue of transaction costs, so if you want to transfer money from Nigeria to the US, for example, I don't know how much you have to add now, but it's not free. But with crypto, the transaction costs are uniform and are lesser most times, so whether you're sending it to Dubai, to Kuwait, to the UK, to Canada, it's kind of uniform across different places. There are no hidden charges, at least there shouldn't be. That's the intention around it, to be able to reduce those kind of transactional costs. The concept of borderless transactions, right? So if you're trying to maybe send dollars, for example, you need to do some conversions and all of that. You have intermediaries, third parties. Maybe it may take 2 or 3 days, they'll be delayed. They will say, okay, pay more money. With crypto on the blockchain, none of that exists. Borderless transactions, no matter where you're sending it, is the same amount of time. The same thing happens, The concept of inflation resistance was also part of the entire process, even though, again, people argue whether that still happens now, but if you look at Naira, for example, it has suffered a lot of inflation and your purchasing power has been greatly damaged and affected, right? But Bitcoin has a limited supply. So it's resistant to inflationary pressures. It provides a store of value. Yes, there can be other issues like scarcity, and other stuff that are introduced. But when you unpack it, really, it's kind of secondary to the whole concept of inflation. Next slide, please. Now, we've seen the whole process expand beyond just Bitcoin. You now have what you call alternative cryptocurrencies, or altcoins, that have their unique features. So, for example, now I, David Zinoturu, can decide I want to have David Singh coin, the way Dogecoin and some of those other memes were popping up as cryptos. I can decide to create my own token, which will be used for a particular process. And you've seen things like Bitcoin Cash now, even been introduced. I wrote something a couple of days ago on how TikTok now have their own crypto tokens. So you can actually use that to make purchases on TikTok. You're beginning to see a lot of things expand beyond just that initial concept of the blockchain. That just shows you how much the blockchain has grown beyond what we could ever I'm not sure that Satoshi in himself thought about a couple of things. Let's even look at the issue of central bank digital currencies as well. You now have these central banks now also creating their own tokens, or what you may call their own virtual currencies. What you just need to be able to understand really between crypto and central bank digital currencies is they are built on the same blockchain technology, really. Just that crypto is decentralized, and CBDCs for short are decentralized. But what you have with CBDCs are digital versions of a country's existing currency. So like the e-Naira, which I'm not sure a lot of us on this platform use, is actually built on that same blockchain technology. So just when you think of central bank digital currency, just know that it's a virtual asset as well. It's a digital currency similar to crypto, but you see those bots there really are the differences, right? Because it uses cryptography. It uses the whole concept of hash, so each one is unique in itself, thereby affecting the entire process of. But the major differences, which actually mean a lot, would be things like that mentioned. It's the CBN, for example, that will issue the e-Naira, while crypto is decentralized. So there's no central authority at all. You just have that distributed network of participants. The currency peg too, with CBDCs, it is tied to the national fiat, which is why sometimes when I look at Nigeria getting on the train of CBDC, I ask myself, what really does that solve? Because we even already have mobile money. Anyway, this is just me doing my own, ruminations around it. But because it's tied to the already worrisome Naira, why would I want to have physical? Why would I want to have, like the digital representation of that same thing that I don't like? But with crypto, there's market supply and demand, which kind of dictates that. And then you have stable coins, for example. Now, stable coins can be pegged to a specific fiat currency, right? And most times you would see it pegged to the US dollar. So if I have a stable coin, which is a digital representation, and I can use it and know that I've stored value to it. So it's always going to be pegged to the US dollar. But with CBDC, it doesn't give me that. Now, another thing that you need to know, though, with the whole process is that CBDCs are actually legal tenders, so you can use them anywhere in the world as legal tender. So e-Naira, for example, is Naira. With crypto, though, of course, some countries like China have banned crypto, so it's not recognized. And then in different jurisdictions, you have different things. But I wanted to just, give that segue to show you how blockchain has expanded just beyond Bitcoin, to other areas. Then I've mentioned smart contracts, and which are built on Ethereum. So in 2013, somebody called Vitalik Buterin created the Ethereum blockchain. And like I had mentioned earlier on, smart contracts are part of what gives the Ethereum blockchain its expansion beyond just currency transactions. And I would say that the introduction of Ethereum made people to start looking at blockchain beyond just Bitcoin. Because, with the Bitcoin blockchain, it was very narrow, I would say. Everybody kept looking at it as, okay, this is Bitcoin. And so it's Bitcoin. But with Ethereum, I think it kind of threw that market open, right? People started looking at it beyond currency transactions, started having, those kind of self-executing agreements. Now you can have dispute resolution mechanisms around there too. Next slide, please. Okay, we are running short on time because we did start late, but I will try and really breeze through quite a number of things. So you've had stuff around diversification of and use cases. Like I mentioned earlier on, you're seeing it go beyond just cryptocurrency now, supply chain management, healthcare, identity verification, you're seeing a lot being done around that. I mentioned CBDCs, which is what you could probably classify as digital payments. You're using it for let's talk about NFTs, for example. And with NFTs, what you have is what you could call like digital ownership of physical assets, right? And it's basically used on the blockchain as well. So you're able to see, blockchain coming in there. When it comes to identity management and verification, blockchain is also used in that process. Real estate transactions. In some jurisdictions, you're seeing blockchain streamline property transactions by providing a transparent record of ownership, so you can actually tokenize, and tokenization is where you convert, physical assets to digital. So you can tokenize real estate assets on the blockchain. When it comes to IP ownership as well, you can actually protect them using the blockchain. And then things like royalty payments for compensation for content creators can actually be embedded using smart contracts, But what are some of the challenges and scalability, right? We've mentioned some of them, right? We've mentioned energy consumption, we've mentioned security, and the issue of scalability. As the number of transactions increased, you said having security concerns. We've mentioned issues around hacking and stuff like that. The issue of volatility too, has also been a major concern. With the prices going up and down, and that's because of the element of speculation that is also introduced with it. We've seen what you could call market manipulation, right? Where they typically refer to them as whales. They try to influence the prices of cryptocurrency for their own benefit, and some of these things that have led to concerns. Next slide, please. Yeah. So we're now in that phase of what is called blockchain 3.0, whereby you're going to start seeing interconnected blockchains. So it's not just going to be one blockchain operating independent of the other. You're actually going to now start seeing some level of connectivity between blockchain A and blockchain B, which is what you may call the next level of how this space is going to work. So there is quite a bit, that is going to unfold in that space. Let's look at public and private blockchain, right? Oh, sorry, wait. Let me just check something here. Okay. Well, okay. So the expansion on public and private blockchain actually comes under lesson 4. So maybe for want of time, we will just skip on that one. And I've mentioned some of the future trends, which we'll see. And some of them are existing now, right? We've talked about NFTs, we've talked about dApps. And now we're seeing a lot happening with AI. There's definitely going to be a lot of intersections with AI and the blockchain technology. Let's move to the next slide. So some of this I've touched on, And I touched on them again, so that as we move along, it becomes less opaque and clearer. The interactions and dependencies among the key components. We've spoken about blocks, and how they are created, containing a list of transactions, timestamp, reference to the previous block through a cryptographic hash. We also briefly touched on the role, it plays, a container for recording multiple transactions. Once it is filled with what should go into that block, a new block is created. So if I'm having a purchase with, say, Honorable Chair, my purchase will be in one block, which will then be completed. And then the next transaction by the Honorable Chair will then be on another block, so it's going to have different transactions on the different blocks. Next slide, please. We've also explained what transactions are, the different things that can happen, and then what is involved in that transaction, and I mentioned here that they are the building blocks of blocks, nodes. We've also explained what nodes are. The individual computers or participants connected to the blockchain network. Each node has a copy of the entire blockchain. So we've touched on that. Next slide. We've also spoken about consensus mechanisms, decentralization as well. Next slide. We mentioned peer-to-peer network. There is no central control. Decisions are made through consensus mechanisms agreed upon by the majority. Next slide. We've also mentioned cryptographic hashing, and how it operates. So I think we can actually move to lesson 4. Thankfully, I had already touched on some of the issues in lesson 3 while doing my explanation. So you have the different types of blockchains. You have public, you have private, and you have consortium. Now, these are very important to understand how the blockchains work, right? When you are also trying to create your tokens, or you have a client who is creating a token or a cryptocurrency, determining the blockchain that will be used for that process is actually very crucial. And let's unpack them, starting with the public blockchain. So the thing about the public blockchain is that it is open to anyone, who wants to participate or join that network. So there are really no restrictions on participation. Anyone can validate transactions and add new blocks to the chain, so, but of course, you have to be able to come into that network in itself. What it just means, though, is that it's open to everybody. So there are no special requirements to be part of a public blockchain. Now, the essence behind this is, having that decentralized ecosystem, right, where no single entity can have control. So there's that inclusivity and transparency around that whole process. Of course, blockchain, Bitcoin blockchain is a public blockchain because anybody, anywhere in the world can engage in the whole mining process, validating transactions and contributing to the network. Ethereum is also another public blockchain, where you use smart contracts to get things done. So developers can deploy decentralized applications, like I had mentioned before, dApps on the Ethereum network. You then have private blockchains. Next slide, please. With private blockchains, you actually have restrictions. And I explained here that a private blockchain is permissioned and operates within the confines of a closed network. Access to the blockchain is restricted to authorized participants, and transactions may require permission to be executed or validated So what you should know about private blockchains is restricted to a predefined group of participants. So unlike the public blockchain where just anybody can join, private blockchains are typically used within organizations or among trusted parties. So that means the whole process of proof of stake, proof of history and all, you wouldn't just be able to join in that entire process. It is only people within the network that can participate. It's only people within that network that whole process will be visible to. And you have companies actually creating their own private blockchains that are used. For example, if you see a bank saying they use blockchain technology to run their network, or see a tech company or something, it then means that blockchain that they're using is not going to be public. So a third party or somebody outside will not now suddenly get on it and be, saying, oh, we're part of the miners or we're part of the nodes. No, that isn't there. And what it actually does is, with those type, for example, you don't have all of that computational overhead, like trying to reach consensus. It's much easier. And I gave some examples of companies, like Quorum. What then happens is if I want to build my own platform, I could then just get those guys to build and manage it for me. Next slide, please. You then have consortium blockchain, right? So it's kind of like in the middle, so to speak, or like I described in the slide, a hybrid model. So it combines both elements of public and private, and is controlled by a group of pre-selected entities or organizations that allow for great scalability, efficiency, and trust compared to the public blockchain. So while it's not entirely open to the public, it's actually more inclusive than the private blockchain. So it allows for multiple organizations to collaborate. Participants can work together, they validate transactions, they maintain the network, and ensure that the transactions go through. So in order for you to be able to advise a client that is looking to go into this space to possibly use the blockchain technology for its product or services, just being able to understand how some of these processes work, or the different types of blockchains that can be used, would be very beneficial. Of course, when my colleague Buki comes tomorrow, she's going to touch on things like keys, like public and private keys, and kind of build on some of these things. But these are the different types of blockchains you can actually build on. Let's move to the next slide. So for some of us who love the regulatory side of things, this would be very helpful. You have regulatory landscape for blockchain technology, and we're going to be focusing on Nigeria. So over the years, we've seen a few things happen as we've moved forward in understanding and enlightenment concerning blockchain in Nigeria. One of the very first things that was done, initially was around the SEC having that roadmap committee that kind of came up with some concepts around different areas of how is fintech going to be used in the capital market in Nigeria. And it came out of a place of, okay, things are happening in other parts of the world. We cannot be left behind. And if everybody is talking about, fintech and blockchain and cryptocurrency is playing in that space, we can't afford to be wholly ignorant of how these processes are going to be. So I would say arguably that was one of the first things that happened within this space, where questions were then being asked, and there were a lot of inquiries around how Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and the other digital assets that operate within that space would come to play. So one of the things that SEC did, which is the second thing there, was they issued a press statement in 2020, September 2020. And having reviewed the report that was given by that roadmap committee, they came out with a statement, because note that at that time, there was a lot of uncertainty over how blockchain would exist, and let's even bring it down to cryptocurrency would exist in the financial landscape of Nigeria. The CBN did not regard it as money. The SEC didn't know what to do with it. So what they then decided to do with that statement was basically say that, look, all cryptos will be deemed as digital assets and securities that will be regulated by the SEC unless proven otherwise, right? So they placed the burden of proving this on the issuer of the assets. If you didn't fall within that space, then you would be regarded as not being regulated by them. But there was a general presumption, like a blanket statement, if you want to look at it that way, that said everybody, if you're involved in crypto, you are regulated by the SEC, and so should come for some form of registration process. But I'm sure that some of us are familiar with what happened with the Central Bank of Nigeria. And that was in February 2021, where they said, look, anybody who is trading in crypto or dealing in crypto cannot use the Nigerian banking system. And quote and unquote, they banned crypto. Now, they couldn't say we hereby ban crypto, because you cannot ban what you do not regulate, right? So I think they were in a bit of a flux. It's not regulated by you, so you cannot ban it. However, banks and other financial institutions are regulated by you. And so that is who you will ban from being able to deal with, those assets, which was what they basically did. And then things were in limbo for a while. But I would actually give props to SEC, because SEC still continued in that entire process. They had what you could call their regulatory sandbox, where they were receiving applications from people within that space. So if you were operating there, you could actually come into their regulatory sandbox and go through some processes. But I had a lot of clients who were asking me questions within this period, that what do they do next? Because even though this had happened, there was still a level of uncertainty around how things could proceed. And so what the SEC then did in 2022 was to actually publish their rules on issuance, offering, and custody of digital assets, right? And so it basically classified a few operators. If you were issuing coins, there's something called initial coin offerings, which is like where you have an IPO, but in this case, you're doing coins. So you can crowdfund and get people to participate in your ICO. If you were involved in an ICO, you needed to register with them. If you were operating as an exchange, you also needed to register with them. So they created like 4 classifications under these rules, and the community celebrated it, but there was still that concern. Okay, so where does this leave them with the CBN ban, quote and unquote? Because even though you can now register with SEC, and I think when I looked at the registration then, I can't remember whether it was 30 million, which I felt was a bit steep, but nevertheless, it's a step, because what existed prior was there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing. So this made a little bit of sense. And so there was that concern. But thankfully, in December last year, the CBN finally released its guidelines on operation of bank accounts for virtual asset service providers. And the summary of that is, if you've registered with the SEC and gotten a license, the banks can actually allow you to bank with them, even though there are certain caveats. For example, banks cannot get involved in crypto in any way. But at least what this did now is there's a level of clarity, which was, very, very necessary at that point. There's a level of clarity now that allows somebody to know, okay, I can actually come into this system. I can get my license from the SEC, which will then allow me to operate my banks, my bank account in Nigeria. You have the Investment and Securities Amendment Bill, and it basically highlights virtual assets. And so it also gives some statutory backing to the whole concept behind cryptocurrencies, because it clearly mentions cryptocurrencies and how the SEC has regulatory oversight over that ecosystem. So again, you're beginning to see more clarity come into that space. You have the Money Laundering Prevention and Prohibition Act 2022 that defines financial institutions to actually include virtual asset providers. And it also defines virtual assets as well. There's a lot of things there around AML, CFT, regulatory purview of the Money Laundering Act. So that has also brought in blockchain and its other assets into that space. The Finance Act has also given some recognition, because it then talks about the taxation of chargeable assets, which includes digital assets as well. There's also the National Blockchain Adoption Strategy, which NIDA issued. I think that was in 2022 as well, which basically tries to give life to the recognition of blockchain and crypto assets. In the interest of time, I would probably move to the questions and see what we have.
All right, Davidson.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the fantastic presentation. Yes, I can see the questions here. I don't think there's any other facilitator in the room, so it'll just be the questions for you. But I want to make a few comments before we go to the questions. Interestingly, we've had quite a number of people joining today from across Nigeria, and I find this very exciting. Yesterday, of course, we all woke up to the news of a purported memorandum of understanding that suggested that UK lawyers will be permitted to practice in Nigeria. And fortunately now we are made to understand that that is not the case. However, whatever happens, this gives credence to the reason why we must, as of necessity, make ourselves more competitive. I would not want to imagine what would happen if the Nigerian government itself takes a very aggressive position on this and says, oh, as part of the trade basket or deal, legal services would have to be thrown into the basket. Whatever happens, the world is becoming a global village. And the more we listen to people like Davidson, you come to realize that the legal space is expanding astronomically across the globe. And we must, as of necessity, equip ourselves to be competitive in the new world and emerging order that must come. So just straight to the questions. There are quite a number of them that are really not for you, Davidson, and I will just throw them. I'll throw them off straight and then go to the ones that are for you. There are a number of questions on how we get the slides. Well, the slides will be made available to every lawyer in Nigeria after the trainings. We're also working on the creation of a blog now to make sure that there's a clear repository for all the slides for all the MBA ICLE trainings. Somebody was asking about recording because he has problems in our network. Well, MBA ICLE is the address of our YouTube channel. Anybody who goes in there will see all our trainings, including the one for today. So just one more, still slides, recordings, MBA ICLE. You can log on straight away and listen to the recording. So the ones that are really your questions, Davidson, so somebody asked, when trust is removed from contract, what is the lawyer's fiduciary duty to the client? Do you want to take that, or is it off the script?
No, that's fine. So the issue of trust in the blockchain space is actually limited, right? Because you want to be able to have a trustless system. That's why blockchain exists at all. Because we as human beings, right, we can be untrustworthy. With the blockchain, though, it means that regardless of whether I like you or we have any prior relationship, everything goes according to play. Now, as lawyers, what we can actually do is to advise our clients around the bindingness of a blockchain transaction, for example, just so that there is that awareness and knowledge. But our own is not to challenge the process or to try and make ourselves more embedded in that system. No. Can I see a couple of questions on people who are saying a couple? No. So again, be mindful that this is a 4-part program and process, right? So everybody needs to go along with the whole script. We can't start from the end before the beginning. You need to understand what blockchain is before you can even get to the end of how you as a lawyer can use it. If I tell you that from day one, then the rest of the program is of no effect, right? So you need to understand how we are proceeding along with this. So the trust system under blockchain is alien. Let me just go back to that. It's not supposed to be a system that is built on. It's supposed to be trustless, whether I trust you or not, provided we've signed up to flow through the blockchain. That's the essence of it. And you as a lawyer will advise your client on how that applies to that transaction. So I don't know if that answers the question, Chair.
Yes, I think so. The next is, please, what is the full meaning of CBDC?
So CBDC is central bank digital currencies, right? That's the currency that is issued by central banks as its own digital currency. So it's built on the blockchain as well. But I mentioned that you have fiat. So fiat is what is used to describe money that is created by banks, while cryptocurrency is what is used to describe these digital assets that are built on the blockchain. But with CBDC, what they've done is they've built virtual currencies similar to cryptocurrency on a blockchain. But cryptocurrency is decentralized, while cryptocurrency is decentralized, while CBDCs are centralized. So CBDC, it is just central bank's digital representation of its fiat currency. So that's why I mentioned the e-Naira, for example, which is our own CBDC in Nigeria.
Okay, so somebody's asking what is cryptographic hashing. He said he missed the part.
Okay. And so sorry for those that couldn't hear me. I mean, I had to use my phone for this entire thing, so it was very inconvenient. Cryptographic hashing, you can look at it as the technology that is used to create on the blockchain. So when each block is created, there is a hash, there is a, and I mentioned, the whole mathematical puzzle, and solution. So each one of them has a mark that goes with it. So think of, let's say, we can say maybe the cryptographic technology that will be used will maybe mark the first block as X, the next block will be A, the next one will be F, So each one of them, when a block is created, it comes along with a hash that is unique to that block. So in order to alter that block, you have to go and alter.
Davidson, we've lost you.
So that's cryptography. It's basically used to
Davidson, we lost you for a while.
Oh wow, I'm sorry.
Almost once you started.
Oh wow, sorry. Okay, let me take that again. I have to just keep apologizing for this.
Don't worry, we're hearing most of what you're saying, so it's good.
Okay, great. Is what is used in creating each block on the block. So when each block is created, it comes with its own unique hash, right? That hash is like a security tag, that comes along with it. So let's say, for example, now there are 10 blocks that are created on the blockchain. Each one of them will come with its own security, and that's the hash. So let's say now the first block may have X on it, right? So cryptography is the technology that will create it and mark it with a signature or symbol that is unique to that block. No other block on that blockchain will look like it. So each block will have its unique one. And so that's why it's difficult to change any of that, because it then means you need to go to all the other blocks and change them. So that cryptographic hash gives it a unique more or less.
Fantastic. So the next question is from Mustafa Baba. It says, now that a company with a license can operate a bank with blockchain, can a transaction occur between the company and an individual?
Sorry, can you take that again?
It says, now that a company with a license can operate a bank with blockchain, can a transaction occur between the company and an individual?
Yeah, sure. That's the whole essence behind CBN, opening things up. The intention is so that so let's say now I'm a company that has a SEC license to operate as a cryptocurrency exchange, for the example, and then somebody wants to buy crypto from my exchange. What that then means is, of course, there are some requirements that CBN set out in its regulations. There's the AML, CFT side of things. There's the due diligence background. But once you meet up with those requirements, then I don't know if you got that. I had a call coming in.
We lost you for a bit.
Yeah, so I said now that CBN has set up this licensing regime, it then means that once you have a license from CBN and you're operating an exchange, you can definitely carry out a transaction with a third party. Of course, there will be the due diligence, the AML, CFT checks that will happen, but you can now bank using your license. Any third party can actually get into your platform and use it.
So, Davidson, we're almost at 4 p.m. We still have a few more questions. I don't know what your schedule is like. Do you think you have another 5 minutes?
So the challenge that I even have is to have another program that I'm
You have to
starting.
go.
Right.
Okay, fine. That's what it is. We'll just
Yeah,
save
but
these questions.
yeah,
Go ahead.
you can save the question and share. But so I would also implore everyone to try and attend all the sessions, because you can't miss one. If you didn't attend mine and Buki comes tomorrow, she may have to start explaining things, because she's not going to start doing introduction. She's not going to start explaining what nodes are, what cryptographic hashes are, and and all of that. She will simply move from that to the next thing. And if Senator is coming too, she's not going to touch on those things because, as we can see, the time is very, very limited. But I'm happy to take any questions. They can be shared with me, and I can quickly try and do justice to them. I apologize for all the difficulties on my own end too.
Thank you very much, Davidson. I mean, so it's a privilege, really, and an honor for us, Davidson, for you to be part of this training session. I must say that on behalf of the MBA ICLE, we're very delighted to have you. We thank you and all the other facilitators on this training, and indeed those who have all ever participated in our ICLE trainings. I'll just say to members of the MBA who are following this training, that all the trainings of the MBA ICLE have been facilitated by colleagues at no cost whatsoever to the MBA or to anybody. It is truly pro bono from them. And you will see the quality of the training that is coming through. If anyone was going to pay for this session, a lot of money would have been paid. But it's a giving back initiative. And we're grateful to Davidson and all those who have given back. Davidson, of course, was a partner in Alex and is now managing director of a company in the US and is doing extremely well and very busy. His time is very precious, but he still found the time, and also despite the time difference. So thank you very much, Davidson. We're grateful to you. We'll hope that you'll be able to join any of the other sessions, and we'll keep discussing. So thank you very much, and God bless. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thanks for saying that. I will try and attend tomorrow's session to at least some aspects of it, so that if there are any questions there as well, I can also jump in on that. And just to also say that while I was on this call, I just noticed that someone from SEC shared with me that their regulatory incubation portal is now open for applications. So I think for any lawyer here who is looking to break into this space, that's good information you can actually put out to your clients or to potential clients, letting them know that SEC is actually now collecting applications for people that are looking to maybe float their tokens or their cryptocurrency.
That is amazing information, real time, fantastic. And I'm happy to see that even this training has gained some sort of interest from the regulators also. And Davidson, do speak to them if they want to sometime to speak at any of the sessions. I think that would also be insightful and helpful to participants. But thank you very much. God bless you for all that you do. I thank all the delegates who have taken time to be here. The trainings continue again tomorrow. We'll also welcome testimonials from those who participated and generally questions and suggestions from them. Thank you very much and God bless. And on the question of slides, they'll be distributed immediately after the fourth session. We have all of them ready. On the question of videos, you can go on MBA ICLE YouTube channel. It's all there. And like I said, we're actually working on a blog where we'll have all our training slides there so that people can go and pick them whenever they need them. So God bless you all and thank you for participating. Bye-bye.